Hello traders, hope you're having a great week. In this video we'll talk about supply and demand. We'll start with supply and demand definition, how to spot and draw valid supply and demand zones on your charts, and then we'll talk about the difference between support and resistance and supply and demand. So let's get started. To explain supply and demand in a simple way, I'll give you a traditional trading example. Let's say I have a shop and I'm selling TVs. Almost 50 clients are waiting outside, waiting to buy my equipment. But I only have 10 TVs. So I higher the price because even if 10 clients find it expensive, I still have 40 clients interested in buying my TVs. So when the demand gets higher, prices go up. However, if I have 50 TVs and only 2-3 clients are interested in buying it, I'll have to lower the prices to make it more attractive to more clients. So now we know what is supply and what is demand. Let's open our charts and look for live forex supply and demand examples. Hello again traders. Before we apply supply and demand on our charts, I want to give you another example so that you understand the math psychology behind supply and demand. Let's say I'm used to buy a bag of rice for like 1 kilogram for $5. Yesterday I went to the supermarket and found that it's now $6. It's $1 higher. And you know, maybe the $1 won't affect me much financially, but I'm used to buy that same bag of rice for $5. So I won't pay that $1 extra, and I'll try to find an alternative for another bag of rice of 1 kilogram for $5. And because it's human nature, many clients just like me won't buy that bag of rice for $6 and wait for it to drop to its original price to start buying it again. So after 1 or 2 weeks, the rice company notices that its sales are dropping very fast and it has to lower its prices again to be able to sell its stock. When it comes to forex or trading in general, the same rule applies, and here instead of rice we have EUR/USD H4. So let's take a quick example. Let's say here you are a trader and you woke up, or you are even looking at your chart and you see that big spike up. So many traders won't buy this one as they believe they are so late now and they missed the big move. So just like our rice example, this one is considered expensive for some traders and won't buy it unless price retested to its original area where price went up from. So this area becomes a demand area, as traders will be looking for buy opportunities around it, considering it a fair price. There are many ways to draw our areas. What we call a base. It can be formed with one candlestick or many candlesticks. In this case, it's only a one candlestick base, and it's usually the last couple of candles or the last candle before the big spike happens. And many traders take into consideration that big spike here, but anyway, do not worry about how to draw it the proper way, as we won't use it for entry. Supply and demand are not a standalone strategy. We will use supply and demand to add extra confluence for an existing setup. One more thing, there are 2 types of supply and 2 types of demand. In this case we have a drop, base, rally, or what we call DBR. Now let's take a look about a supply example. Here we have a supply zone. As you can see, a big candle, momentum candle to the downside. So many traders saw this one here and say, no, I'm not going to sell this one because it's giving me a bad risk to reward ratio and I'm already late, feeling in pain, so I won't sell this one. I'll wait for a retest to look for sell opportunities. So this one becomes a supply zone, and just like this example, we can draw our zone from the last candle here. As you can see, the last bullish candle, in this case it's a one candlestick base, and we will consider it as our supply zone. Some people would like to extend it to cover the movement before the reversal happens, but I honestly like to minimize it in a way not to bother my eyes, and again because I will not be looking for to sell this one just after it retested our supply zone, but I will be looking for sell opportunities around this one because as we mentioned, supply and demand are not a standalone strategy, and we will be looking for sell opportunities around it and won't sell it immediately after a retest. So in this case we have a rally, base, and then drop, or what we call RBD. And in this particular example we've got a trend line here, as you can see, or even a channel. Let's make it in purple, or even a channel. We've got a supply zone, and maybe we have divergence. Let's add MACD and take a look. Here we go. Price is making higher highs while MACD is making lower highs. So we have a divergence here, a channel in purple, and a supply zone. So here we have a 3 confluences, valid setup, and we'll be looking for sell opportunities at the trend line break downward. So as you can see, it's always better not to rely on supply and demand blindly, but to look for objective setups around it, for 2 or 3 more clues to buy or sell around our supply and demand zones. And one more thing, the stronger the move from our supply or demand zone, the bigger the impact would be on its retest. So in this example, this supply zone is stronger than this demand zone because the candle, the momentum candle from it, is bigger than this one. Now let's delete our MACD and look for more supply and demand examples. Here we have another supply zone. As you can see, the base is formed from many candles and not just one candle like this one. So here in this case, our base is all the range before a momentum candle to the downside happens. So in this case, here we have a supply zone, and just like the other example, the previous one, it's a rally, base, drop. Okay, so it's an RBD. And here's an example of a demand zone formed by a base and not just one candle like this one. And I always like to make my supply zones in red and demand zones in blue. So let's change it. Here we go, and you can always extend it to cover the spike before the movement upwards. And as mentioned, we will be looking for buy opportunities around our demand zone, and will not enter buy immediately after the retest. So in this case, for example, we've got a trend line and a double bottom pattern. Let's make it in purple. And we will not buy after a retest of the demand zone, but we'll be looking for buy opportunities. So here we go, we have a pattern, a trend line in purple, and a demand zone, which will be considered as only one confluence or one clue, and the entry would be the break above our trend line or the neckline of the double bottom pattern. So here would be our entry, or even here at the candle close above our trend line. Here we also have a supply zone. As you can see, big momentum candle pushing downwards. In this case, it's a drop, base, drop. So it's a DBD. Okay, let's make it in red, and let's delete our previous gray zone. So here we have a drop, base, drop, because it's formed with a couple of candles and not just one candle. And you can look for sell opportunities when price retests this supply zone. Again and again, supply and demand zones are not bulletproof and should not be used as a standalone strategy. We always look for opportunities around our supply and demand zones and not enter immediately after the retest. As you can see here in our chart, we have many supply and demand zones that price didn't respect. Let's take some examples and let's change the color. Let's make it in gray. So as you can see here we have a demand zone. Okay, so price didn't respect it and keep pushing downward. And Here we have a supply zone. Also price didn't respect it. Let's change the color one more time and to give you an example of a rally, base rally. Let's make it in purple. Here we have a rally, base rally. Okay, so here's our base before price went up. So here we have a demand zone. Let's make it in blue. So now we have four types, 2 types for supply, 2 types for demand. Here we have a rally base drop, and for the supply, here we have a drop base drop. So these are the 2 types of supply. Here we have a drop base rally, and here we've got a rally base rally, the 2 types for the demand. Let's make a quick recap before we explain why and how supply and demand are not like support and resistance. First of all, we learned that we want a big momentum candle to consider it a valid demand or supply zone. Our base can be 1 candle or couple of candles, and the stronger the move from our demand or supply zone, the stronger the impact would be on the retest. Supply and demand zones are not bulletproof or a standalone strategy, so it doesn't matter how accurate you draw your zones, as we are not going to use them as immediate entry after the retest. We'll be looking for opportunities for at least 2 more clues to buy or sell around our supply and demand zones. We have two types of demand. The first type is a drop base rally, so it's a DBR, and we have a rally base rally, so RBR. These are the 2 types for the demand zone, and exactly the opposite for the supply zone. We have a drop base drop, so it's a DBD, and we have a rally base drop, so exactly like this one, rally base drop. Now let me find a simple example to show you the difference between support and resistance and supply and demand. Great, here we go. As you can see here, price is stuck in a range between a resistance and support. Let's make this one in blue and keep this one in red. As you may already know, support and resistance are areas where price failed to break at least twice. So in this example here we have a resistance area, price failed to break above it here, and then a second time here. So from now on, we can start looking for sell opportunities around this resistance area. While here, price failed to break below this area here. Here's the first attempt, and here's the second one. So starting from here, we can start looking for buy opportunities around it. And as usual, support and resistance are zones and not laser lines on our chart. So here's our support area, and here's our resistance area. However, supply and demand are completely different, as it's originated from one single untouched point. Let's take an example for the supply. Here we have a supply zone. As you can see, a big momentum candle to the downside, and the base is the last bullish candle, right? Here's the base, 1 candlestick base, and here we've got a supply zone. Now it happens that our supply zone is sitting at a resistance area, but as you can see, there are 2 completely different. The resistance area is originated after 2 failed attempts, while our supply zone is originated from 1 single untouched point. So we'll be looking for a sell opportunity around it, while we need two previous touches to consider it as a resistance and start looking from here. Right, so 2 points for resistance to start looking for a sell opportunities, while only 1 point is enough for the supply zone to be considered a rejection area and start looking for sell opportunities around it. And the same thing applied for our demand zone. Here we have a demand zone. As you can see, here's our base, the last bearish candle before the momentum bullish candle upwards. So here's our base. And as you can see here, we didn't have our support zone yet, as price didn't form the second failed attempt. So price came down, formed a demand zone, after that big momentum candle upwards, and then after this movement upward, we can consider that we have a support area here. So again and again, our demand area here can be formed with a single one untouched point, while we need at least two failed attempts to consider a valid support zone. So let's make another example. Price formed our support area here after the second failed attempt. So from this point and this point, we've got our support area valid now. Then price make a retest and formed another demand zone after that big momentum candle to the upper side. So we've got our base here. Let's make it another color. Here's our base, the last couple of candles before the momentum candle upwards. Let's make it in gray, giving us an opportunity to look for buy opportunities around here, as price didn't retest our support zone before going up. So let's make a quick recap. Support and resistance are completely different from supply and demand, but sometimes it happens that we have a supply zone around our resistance and a demand zone around our support. So here we'll be looking for sell opportunities, as we already have two confluences. As you can see, we have a resistance area and we have a supply zone. So let's take a look and look for sell opportunities around it. As you can see here, price rejected our supply and resistance area, and we can look for sell opportunities at the break of this trend line. That's it for supply and demand. If you have any more questions, feel free to leave a comment, and I'll see you in the next video.